Good day, everyone, and welcome to the 16th session of UPM SILab's webinar series IOL 101 2025. I'm JR Pingol and I will be your host for today's session. At UP Manila Standards and Interoperability Lab, or UPM SILab, we are driven by a clear mission, and that is to accomplish universal health by enhancing digital health capabilities in this 2025. Our focus is on equipping our community with essential knowledge about digital health. And to this end, we present our weekly webinar series IOL 101 2025, where we explore the most recent trends and challenges in digital health and interoperability, specifically within the context of the Philippines. Last Wednesday, we held an in-depth session on cybersecurity in national health systems. We learned and explored how strengthening cybersecurity in public health infrastructures is not just about protecting systems, but about safeguarding patients' rights and maintaining the public trust in our healthcare institution. And today, we're excited to introduce a brand new topic, which is bridging diagnostic gaps, integrating point of care, ultrasound, or POCUS with AI into human workflows. And just a brief background about the topic, point of care ultrasounds or POCUS has revolutionized bedside diagnostics by delivering real-time imaging, particularly in resource-constrained environments where traditional imaging options are limited. The combination of artificial intelligence with POCUS presents remarkable opportunities for enhancing medical workflows through better image capture and analysis. However, it's crucial to establish ethical frameworks to ensure successful implementation. This concludes fostering trust between clinicians and AI, safeguarding patient privacy, and creating workflows that complements rather than replace clinical expertise. The scalability of focus in the future will rely on the development of reliable AI integrated systems that provide advanced diagnostic in various healthcare settings. That's it. And again, thank you all for joining us this morning. And we look forward to an engaging and informative session with all of you. And as always, we are grateful to our partners, DOST, PCHRD, and CSIRO Australia, through the Strengthening Standards Capability Projects, or SSCP, for supporting our webinar series. Okay, but before we proceed with our session, just a quick rundown of our house rules. Okay, this session is being recorded, and by proceeding with the meeting, you are consenting to be recorded. Kindly stay muted throughout the lecture, and a new virtual background has been provided to your email, so turning on your camera is much appreciated. We encourage everyone to please change your name for proper identification, and please add your affiliation beside your name for proper recognition. We want this session to be engaging and interactive. There will be a Q&A portion after the lecture. So please actively participate and don't hesitate to ask your questions. Okay, we have three options. You can use the raise hand function and then unmute your mic. You can type in your question in the chat box, or if you want to ask anonymously, you can use the Q&A button. And please do not leave the session after the Q&A, as we will be having our photo group photo taken. And lastly, to receive your electronic certificate of participation, do not forget to complete the evaluation form after the session. And please note the following criteria to obtain your certificate. And to move on, we are excited to invite new friends and colleagues to join UPM SILab's community of practice. This group consists of experts and practitioners who are passionate about advancing standards and interoperability in healthcare. You can sign up to receive our newsletter and join our WhatsApp group. Simply scan the QR code displayed on screen. We encourage everyone to join our community and receive updates from UPM SILab. Everyone is welcome. Okay. Okay, and for today's agenda, I'm excited with this. May I introduce our esteemed resource speaker for this session of IOL 101. It is my great pleasure to introduce to the group Dr. Mena Ramos. Dr. Mena Ramos is a family physician and the co-founder and co-CEO of Global Ultrasound Institute, or GUSI, a medical education, software, and AI company based in San Francisco, California. She has significantly contributed to point-of-care ultrasound, or POCUS, through her advocacy, research, and innovation. She co-authored the original POCUS guidelines for the American Association of Family Physicians, or AAFP, and the textbook Ultrasound for Primary Care. Her research portfolio includes multiple peer-reviewed publications that focus on implementing POCUS in resource-limited settings. Dr. Ramos' extensive work includes establishing foundational POCUS guidelines in primary care and developing scalable training solutions to address diagnostic gaps in underserved healthcare environment worldwide. And now, to present the topic, Bridging Diagnostic Gaps, Integrating Point-of-Care Ultrasound, or POCUS, and AI into Human Workflows. Join me, let us virtually welcome Dr. Mena Ramos. Over to you, Doc Mena. Good afternoon po.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sir JR, for that very generous introduction. I am Dr. Mena Ramos. I'm a family physician and the co-founder of Global Ultrasound Institute. And I'm just extremely excited to be sharing with you today about a topic that is very much near and dear to my heart, and that is point-of-care ultrasound, specifically how POCUS and AI can bridge diagnostic gaps while addressing real fears in terms of human workflows. By way of disclosures, as I am the co-founder, I'm also co-CEO of GUSI, and we have received funding from the Gates Foundation for multiple projects. While I am presenting this work alone today, it really wouldn't be possible without the collaborative effort and shared insights from a team. The GUSI team made of both medical and technical and AI experts across the world, and also our research partners from multiple academic institution and funding partners. So I'm just extremely grateful for the opportunity to present on this work. By the end of today's webinar, I hope that you are convinced that healthcare, universal healthcare, that is both efficient, equitable, fairly financed, and utilized by the word public is in fact possible with technology augmented by AI that strengthens healthcare delivery based on trust and humility. And so this language around efficiency, equitability, fairly financed, and utilized by an empowered public comes directly from the Universal Health Care Act and language, as you can see here, towards the bottom half, quality healthcare services, efficiently delivered, equitably distributed, and fairly financed, utilized by an empowered public. And so it's that framework that I'm going to share with you several insights on POCUS, the opportunities for POCUS and AI. Now, by way of overview, I'll first start by addressing this diagnostic gap and then introduce POCUS as well as challenges to integration with AI and conclude with the importance of trust and epistemic humility. Now, the diagnostic gap, the global diagnostic gap, I don't think is a significant surprise to anyone. Approximately half of the world still doesn't have basic access to medical imaging. And that is also true in the Philippines, where the distribution of a basic medical equipment. This example illustrates the number of units per 1 million people in the population, units of X-rays. You can see that there is a difference in terms of access in Luzon versus the Visayas and Mindanao. And I don't think that comes as a significant surprise, especially considering that 3/4 of tertiary care facilities are located in Luzon, but also that the Philippines is a country of over 7,000 islands. And so that poses a dilemma in terms of facilitating access to healthcare infrastructure for all Filipinos. Now, this particular topic is very, very, very as I mentioned, near and dear to me. As a daughter of two Southern Latinos, two very proud Southern Latinos who are in Maasin right now. I think they might be listening. This is in the outskirts of Maasin, a barangay called Lonoy, and this is a story of Francisco here in this photograph, who lived in Lonoy, and one day got sick. He had pain in his belly, and unfortunately, at the time, which was several decades ago, his family didn't have the resources to take him to get any medical imaging and treatment. So unfortunately, he passed away without accessing care. And my great hope is that gap, that we can start to close that gap, and that stories like Francisco, who is actually my lolo. So this is very, very much near and dear to my heart. That stories like my lolo Francisco's story isn't that we can change that reality today. So moving on, why point of care ultrasound? Why POCUS? Of all the kinds of interventions in medicine, why this one specific? And I think it's important to take a step back and kind of understand POCUS. I think it's important to understand how technology has developed over the course of the history of medicine, and how we as physicians have been trained to take care of people and arrive at answers and diagnoses. So let's take a step back and look at the history of medicine. The physical exam. This is an example here on the left, 400 BC of palpation, and that being an important tool that we use to get answers. Over 200 years ago, the stethoscope was invented, and that still remains a very important diagnostic tool for medical professionals around the world. But once again, the stethoscope is now over 200 years old. And so fast forward with the evolution of technology in medicine, ultrasounds, which I think most people are familiar with because of obstetrics and babies. The ultrasounds have developed over the last several decades, and they used to be much bigger, but they've gotten smaller and more miniaturized. So in the way computers have become more miniaturized in the form of laptops and now smartphones, ultrasounds have become more portable and accessible through these miniaturized devices. And when we think about POCUS, right? Oftentimes when you say POCUS, if you're familiar with POCUS, what comes to mind is a portable ultrasound. However, it's more than just a portable ultrasound or a piece of technology, but it's actually a work and this workflow, I think understanding the human component, how this workflow is essentially a re-engineering of what was once a very multi-step process. So if we look at this diagram here, the top line, you can see several different steps along the way. This is, if you just think about the last time you or a family member needed any kind of imaging or an ultrasound. Now, imagine what that process was like. You had to see your doctor or your healthcare professional, and they ordered a test, which then had to be done by someone else typically. And then those images had to be interpreted, usually by a radiologist, and then those images reviewed again. Those findings communicated in order to hopefully have a better treatment plan or a diagnosis. And so that process can take a long time. It can take hours, it can take months, it can take and it may not happen at all because of these barriers that can be sometimes too formidable for some people and their families, and not to mention the expense. Okay, and in the Philippine context, of course, that also could require significant travel. Which also adds expense. So now imagine a much more streamlined workflow that is accelerated or made more possible with portable imaging that is connected to the internet, so you can share digital information and do what's called a point of care exam, where now imagine now you show up to see your doctor and that person can show you what's happening in your body and give you an answer, or at least narrow down the possibilities right then and there. So we see now this possibility of a streamlined workflow that's very much human-centered, that can happen much faster and much more cost effectively. And the other amazing thing about POCUS is that it has so many different use cases, right? It's not just for babies, it goes far beyond that. You can diagnose infectious diseases like pneumonia in children, and cirrhosis of the liver. There's so many different use cases that from head to toe. And this is just one diagram of showing the leading causes of death in lower income countries, and what applications, what POCUS applications with AI can be relevant to help in the treatment and care of patients. Um, so not only do we have just potential for increased accessibility because of portability, a streamlined, faster workflow with multiple different use cases. It's also this is an interesting study from amazing colleagues doing amazing work in Europe, looking at specifically from the patient's perspective, how they experience POCUS in general, how that affected trust, how that affected their understanding of their own health problem, how it affected their feeling of being taken seriously, and how it affected their feeling of security and being well examined. And you can see that for the vast majority, that increased or significantly increased all of those positive patient experience indicators, which this part of POCUS is not always talked about, but I think it's so important that to highlight that the trust and patient experience side has been shown through this research by Dr. Anderson and her colleagues, that POCUS can have this positive effect. And so if we, summarize all these benefits, patient understanding and transparency and trust, cost, potentially decreased costs, less radiation. And there are many, many studies for different use cases that show improved accuracy, definitely compared to the physical exam, and in many cases also compared to X-ray. You may think, how is this just extremely expensive, and how can you incorporate this in resource limited settings? And when you compare the costs of portable handheld ultrasounds, they're significantly cheaper than alternative imaging like X-ray, portable or fixed X-ray, CT scanners, and MRIs at quite a bit of magnitude. And these are based on last year's market data. So a few $1,000s versus tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of US dollars in difference. And so one can make the argument that POCUS, while even including other costs like education and training, and and needing to adapt, say, a local health center, which really doesn't require much, if any, adaptation of say a specific room or facility for a POCUS, that the cost considerations are significantly favorable for POCUS. Okay, so I spent a lot of time talking about POCUS, but you all know that I absolutely love POCUS, and so if I've done a good job making the case, I think he might be thinking, why isn't everyone already doing it, right? And why hasn't it already become standard of care? And I think the answer is it's multifactorial, but like any new technology, there are always barriers to adoption. This was a paper that I co-wrote with Dr. Michelle Beam and Dr. Sheikh Fareed on POCUS in resource-limited settings. It was a narrative review, and we summarized several of these barriers to adoption, and I like to kind of frame them in a simple way: people, process, and products. So people, like the lack of trained personnel who can use these devices who know how to use these devices, feel comfortable and confident, and have the training and the credentialing to be able to safely use these devices to take better care of their patients. And of course, that then also includes funding, but there's also kind of societal, cultural considerations within within the culture of medicine, such as just lack of awareness when new technologies come out. Not everyone knows about everything new overnight. That takes time, and of course there's lack of trust. And so these barriers to adoption, we'll think of them as people-centered barriers. In terms of process, process is also systems, and so having standardization, like standardized clinical guidelines that are contextual and specific, country by country, region by region, for different use cases. Having a process or system to support learners, quality assurance, to support learners and ensure quality over time, that what a clinician is seeing or reading on an ultrasound is in fact accurate, for safety purposes. So QA is important really in rolling out any new systems, new processes, and new technology in medicine. And I think this topic on EMR integration, workflow integration, I think will be a very interesting topic for several of you on the call that have a particular interest in digital health and digital data security, and EMR workflow integration. So we can talk a little bit more about that later. In terms of products, I think of products as kind of the stuff, both in terms of equipment. So just you need to have access to the equipment, of course. Also in terms of infrastructure. So where is this going to take place? Is there supporting infrastructure to support this human-based workflow? So all of these kind of different barriers to adoption have proven significant, but little by little, they're being addressed around the world. And this is a very, very busy slide, but intentionally so, because I wanted to show just the number. This is not a complete list, but this is a number of different societies, mainly based in North America: American College of Physicians, Society of Ultrasound and Medical Education, American College of Chest Physicians, the American Medical Association, and the American Academy of Family Physicians. These are just to name a few. Society of Critical Care and Medicine. These are all medical societies that have already issued position statements in support of POCUS for a specific scope within that medical specialty. So this is while widespread POCUS adoption, we're still in the early stages. We are much farther along in terms of societies making statements about POCUS adoption, and in support of POCUS adoption. And we're seeing now, in this is medical training in the United States, that approximately half medical schools have POCUS integrated within the curriculum. Some studies suggest even as much as three-quarters. So we can see that the medical education and training pipeline has already moved towards incorporating POCUS into the medical workflow and the clinical exam. I'll just take a few minutes to talk about the work that we've done at GUSI, Global Ultrasound Institute, to address some of these barriers in terms of people, process, specifically kind of the gaps in training, and the need for collaboration to do quality assurance long term to support learners to get to confidence and competency. And on the kind of systems and technical side, fragmented the problem with fragmented storage in order to perform quality assurance, and of course data silos, and AI inequity, which I'll address in a little bit. And so to address some of these issues, the team at GUSI has worked diligently to develop a POCUS ecosystem in order to bring physicians, clinicians together in an environment or a digital environment that can facilitate both teaching and training, quality assurance, longitudinal support, and collaboration. Because as we've seen time and time again with some of these barriers, it really does require a much more comprehensive approach that brings together technology and into human workflows for medical professionals. And I'm just really proud to be part of this team that has now trained over 18,000 learners in over 60 countries, and we've translated our platform in over 20 languages. So I'm just extremely proud that we're spearheading this and really advocating and doing the education and training and building community around POCUS. Okay. So I've talked about POCUS. I've talked about some of the challenges and key barriers to integrating it effectively. And so let's now kind of introduce AI as an augmentation of a existing technology that can further enhance POCUS within human workflows. So let's take a look here. In terms of different applications for POCUS, this is an incomplete list. But you can see here that POCUS applications such as POCUS for musculoskeletal, sports medicine, bladder volume, cardiac, DVT, obstetric care, heart rate, thyroid, that there are, and this is, once again, this is an incomplete list, that there are features now, AI features that assist with interpretation and image acquisition that can aid the healthcare professional. So let's take a look at one of these tools and kind of make it come to life a little bit. So just imagine you're a doctor and you've done some training in POCUS, and you have an idea, you have some comfort, you have a certain degree of comfort in terms of how to get an image like a heart. So this is an image of a heart, and now you have built-in tools to help you both acquire that image and also evaluate it. So you can get an automatic reading of, say, in this case, this is a heart rate. And so this is if you have limited to no training, it can be an assist, but AI doesn't completely address all the elements of the workflow, and of course there are challenges and towards its safe and ethical implementation that we all have to be aware of. And there have been multiple studies on this, and certainly much more that will be in the pipeline. But this paper is scoping review on AI for POCUS and low resource settings that looked at that combed through over 1,000 different records in several databases, PubMed, Google Scholar, and identified 29 different studies. And what they found was that the primary AI technique were deep algorithms around lung ultrasound, obstetric ultrasound, and other applications for emergency and ICU. This is another paper, another scoping review on also AI and POCUS. This is coming from Australia. And it looked at 33 different studies across multiple databases. And what they found was that one of the primary application for the AI features was around the heart and lung region, as well as obstetrics, so biometry, so measuring babies, and that's an important part in prenatal care for risk assessment, as well as for care in acute environments. And so I think just kind of having a big picture kind of a view of how POCUS is being used in terms of image acquisition to help with image acquisition, as well as interpretation to enhance accuracy are some of the ways that AI is augmenting elements of that human workflow. So if you can remember the diagram that had multiple steps, the part about image acquisition and interpretation can in the right setting, in the right clinical context, be helpful. But once again, that does require a certain degree of knowledge and experience in terms of, and to be able to safely and contextually apply AI that is both agile and reflexive, that can change with new data. And so, in terms of AI recommendations, if we break them up into several different categories in terms in direction where we should go for research, and there's still lots of methodological gaps, and the need for POCUS AI, POCUS validation, especially within specific contexts, because one of the challenges is that data sets are not always trained, are not always used to train on within the same population wherein AI is being used. And so that runs the risk of deepening bias and inequity, and further cementing legacy systems. We have to be just very mindful of that. Also, contextualization, focus on, the power of AI the power of POCUS with AI is not necessarily a one size fits all, but being able to, especially when you're talking about a clinical workflow, know how to incorporate POCUS to answer a specific question or augment a specific workflow, because that can look different in different environments based on local epidemiology and based on resources available. And of course, the need for research in terms of long patient outcomes. More work really needs to be done in this area. Now, when looking at clinicians, comprehensive training, I've met many doctors and nurses and nurse midwives who have about learning POCUS, but have needed training, and I think this is especially true when you introduce AI, so that we can safely introduce AI. But even with AI, we need to learn how to use AI, how to ask the right questions, how to be able to how to maintain some degree of clinical oversight for AI-assisted decisions. How do we know? How do we know when there is a limitation? How do we know how to use the tools to improve patient care and instead of potentially deepening bias? And so definitely more work needs to be done here. And then if we look at health systems, implementation frameworks, policies for AI governance and accountability, infrastructure support. I think this audience, this is something that you all have spent quite a bit of time talking about, and I would love to, learn from you all kind of what is working and where more support is needed, and how AI with AI in POCUS can integrate into health systems safely. And so if we take a step back and think about this framework in terms of barriers or opportunities or challenges, they exist even with AI. The need to build trust is still very much is very, very important in order to get adoption of a new tool with or without AI, how to take that information and appropriately validate it and appropriately integrate it into medical decision making, how to break data silos so that there's much more transparency in how models are developed that incorporate local data that are reflective and reflexive. There's incredible work coming out of being done by a colleague, Dr. Leocelli, and spearheaded by Dr. Leocelli with a group at MIT, MIT Critical Data, and they're doing just incredible work championing a much more community-based approach to AI that encourages critical thinking, epistemic humility, in order to be able to truly utilize this new powerful technology to bring out the better parts of healthcare and our humanity. And then lastly, products or healthcare infrastructure. How do you integrate POCUS with AI across different types of devices in different types of health settings with different types of medical records? So the contextual, the specific contextual environment has to guide, and the needs of that environment have to guide how POCUS with AI can be integrated safely. Okay, and I'm going to just spend a couple more minutes here talking about trust and epistemic humility. This is, why is trust and humility important when we're talking about POCUS and AI? And I mentioned trust specifically as a barrier to adoption. If you don't trust a model or a tool, you're not going to use it. I think that's self-evident. Attenuated adoption of tools that might be very beneficial. But in addition to that, the lack of trust and can also and lack of epistemic humility, or the capacity to ask more questions, to know that we don't have all the answers, to not to trust but not trust blindly, requires I think will help us mitigate the risk of deepening bias and entrenched legacy systems and medical decision making. So, medicine today is not perfect, and if we train on just very much limited and historical data, that doesn't necessarily that doesn't adapt to prospectively and isn't contextualized, then I think we run the risk of truly, instead of improving healthcare equity, running the risk of doing the opposite. And the one of the many reasons why I think the opportunity here is so big, with POCUS, with ultrasound augmented by AI, is because there's something about ultrasound which creates a dialogue between two people, which bridges understanding and connection. Seeing is believing, and ultrasound as a modality, being able to show in real time what's going on in the body and explain what's going on, it creates a dialogue, which is such an important creating dialogue is such an important precursor to being able to build and strengthen that patient-doctor relationship. And why now? This is a study from the United States showing just a significant decrease in trust for physicians and hospitals over the last few years. And so trust is I think it's going to be an increasing issue, as well as burnout among healthcare professionals. And if we look at healthcare professionals and patients and health systems and where they overlap, that disconnection and lack of dialogue and lack of trust are 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 um, are critical elements to being able to effectively and safely incorporate any kind of new technology or workflow that has the potential to improve the quality of care for people. And so this increase in trust to fostered by connection and dialogue and interpreting data that's on a screen for someone who's in pain can be very, 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 very powerful and transformative. So, as we conclude this part of the webinar, I'm kind of coming back to the key takeaway that I hope at this point I've made that argument well, that universal healthcare that's efficient and equitable, fairly financed, and utilized by an empowered public is indeed possible with POCUS, augmented by AI, especially when based on trust and within the framework of humility. And so, kind of going back to the Universal Healthcare Act, which I think is just so moving, the language, particularly around an appropriately utilized, informed, and an empowered public, that these specific points, these expand the number of services in primary healthcare. So POCUS can be one of those, increasing the rate of utilization in primary healthcare. There's been some research to show that POCUS in primary care and rural facilities has increased patients going to seek care in those facilities. So very interesting. And then this last point about timely reporting of health data for monitoring performance and assessment evaluation. I think this is something that we have to continue to work on as a community of clinicians, data scientists, folks in public and private sector through public and private partnerships. That this requires a multi specialty across industry type of approach to be able to achieve this goal. So with that, thank you so much. I'm very, very grateful uh, to UP Manila and the SILab for this opportunity, the National Telehealth Center and the National Sciences Center at the University of the Philippines, Manila. If please reach out. My email is here, Mena@GUSI.POCUS. We do have internships available for those in data science. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm just very grateful for this opportunity and want to open the floor for questions, comments, discussion. Sir JR, I'll let you kind of take the lead.
Dr. Mena, for the enlightening talk. We enjoyed your informative lecture. And now I'd like to invite the participants to share their thoughts. We are now opening the floor for question and answer. Again, we have three options. You may use the raise hand function. You can chat your questions in the chat box, or you can use the Q&A button. Okay. Let me read the questions here, Doc Mena. Okay, we have here, how do you define adequate image quality?
That's a great question. Adequate image quality, well, for one, it really depends on the type of exam that you are performing, and two, the specific clinical use case. So, what is the question that you're answering, and is the image quality to answer that question, is it appropriate? So, one way to think about that is in the context of traditional imaging. There's even when all image criteria, say, have been met, the diagnosis is still unclear, or the interpretation of the image is still unclear. So clinical correlation required, as is something that you'll, I think, often see on a radiology report. So for POCUS, there's certain specific parameters based on the type of scan that's being performed. So, is this a focused cardiac scan? Is this a focused scan of the gallbladder? Is this a scan of in second trimester of pregnancy? And number two is, what is the question being answered? And so, for example, is the question being answered, is the presentation of the baby, is this a cephalic presentation? So the quality of the image, or the is it really depends on the specific context and clinical question that's being answered. So there isn't really a single universal answer for that, because it's contextual.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc Mena. Doc, I want to read this comment and question from Dr. Thomas. I agree so much that handheld ultrasound is the future of the stethoscope. When do you think the widespread adoption of this will happen? The trends in decrease of cost is happening, but isn't there yet for all clinicians to have one in their pockets when doing rounds or in low resource settings? And then number two, given that I've seen projects and a few papers on the sound data taken from the classic stethoscope, which could still be an opportunity for AI to aid in clinical assessments. However, reliability and repeatability is still questionable. How would this compare to the reliability from the AI model outputs with Focus?
Wow, that's really a fascinating question and comment. Two-part question. The first part around how long do I think it will take, and access in terms of cost. I mean, if we take a look at the last 5 to 10 years, the number of devices, portable devices that are now on the market, expanded significantly. I've been teaching POCUS for well over a decade, and when I first started, there was one or two portable devices. Now they're over 20. So the number of devices, I think, if we look at other industries, that tends to decrease prices, particularly when there's competition, and there's such a significant global need for even more affordable devices. So I think the price for devices will go down over time, which will aid in adoption. But once again, access to the device is one barrier. Education and training are still very, very much important elements. Just like if we look at the stethoscope, having a stethoscope doesn't necessarily mean you know how to use it or interpret what you're hearing, and then integrate that information into medical decision making. Like, what does the wheezing mean in this context? What does the crackles or crepitus mean? And that the interpretation of those findings is different for different in different clinical contexts, different patient population, different symptoms of presentation. So I don't think that we can ever teach or train POCUS without the clinical integration element. You also had a question or comment about reproducibility, and there is with just like just like stethoscope, this is very much operator dependent. So AI is one of the use cases is in terms of image acquisition, and grading the quality of image by being able to evaluate whether certain landmarks are present. So there's some great models doing this specifically for cardiac ultrasound. That this particular view of the heart, this apical fourth chamber or parasternal long axis, is of high quality because you see X, Y, and Z landmarks. So I do think AI is going to one of the use cases in terms of being able to evaluate and assess image quality, image acquisition quality is really, I think, an important use case. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Mena. Dr. Mena, there's a follow-up question from Dr. Thomas. Given the rise of skepticism with clinicians in AI, how can we improve explainability and human in the loop systems in medical imaging for clinicians?
Oof. Well, as I will say, my background is not as a technologist, so I can't go very, very, very deep dive into the math and architecture behind these different tools. However, what I can say in terms of trust and adoption within healthcare, if we take a step back and look at any kind of transformative technology that has been shown to improve healthcare. One example is laparoscopic surgery. So in the early days, when laparoscopic tools were introduced, it was met with resistance because standard of care was different. You were doing open surgery and not laparoscopic surgery. So it took time to gather the data. It took time to train and develop champions within the profession who could advocate, who were part of governing bodies and national societies to then further advocate to develop clinical and educational guidelines for graduate medical education. So I think we're still quite a ways in terms of full integration of AI and in any form of generalizability. However, I think just when the power of POCUS and is in being able to understand both it's both its strengths but also limitations based on the context. So I think the same with AI in POCUS is understanding how models are developed, where their ideal use cases are, where their weaknesses are, how to both identify them to be able to improve them over time. Because while there is a skepticism, the AI train has left the station, and I think it's our responsibility to remain to be able to ask the critical questions and empower clinicians to be able to engage with these tools in a safe and in a critical way as well.
Much, Doc Mena. Doc, may have a question here from Sir JL of South Cotabato. Here in the Philippines, especially at the provincial level, where we are implementing universal healthcare, we honestly don't have a clear picture of the current status of POCUS adoption across different health facilities. From your experience, what practical steps should we start doing now, both at the policy and health system level, to prepare ourselves to adopt POCUS and AI enhanced workflow later on, even if we can't implement them immediately? For example, what baseline capacity building, regulatory preparation, or planning activities would you recommend so we don't get left behind?
Thank you for that question and that kind of big picture approach in the Philippine context. And I think the Philippine context has its own specific nuance, just like any health system anywhere around the world. That being said, I think that we can look at different examples from other countries of ways in which POCUS has been where great strides have been made at a systems level. So there's been amazing projects and work that's been done in Kenya that started with a grant-funded project that involved teaching and training 500 nurse midwives and basic obstetric point-of-care ultrasound from the more rural areas of Kenya where maternal mortality rate was higher. And that led to the development of national guidelines for point of care ultrasound and antenatal and basic obstetric care. So there have been success stories that I think that we can learn from. But if I were, say, looking at making an investment, I pulled up this slide on barriers to adoption because it can't it can't just be one approach. I think it has to address both people in terms of the clinicians, the need for training, the need for the processes or systems type of considerations, standardized clinical guidelines at the national society level, advocate that. And also, in systems that have trained personnel and usually requires some POCUS champion that has the skill set and will advocate for it and has seen how it really transforms practice. And then addressing the need for, of course, equipment, even if it's at a small scale, to just pilot and test and show, prove the use case, prove how effective effective POCUS rollout can be even at a small scale to then build upon that. So I think there are different approaches, but public and private pilot testing even at small scale can be very, very effective. And then when thinking about kind of larger infrastructure types of changes, the EMR, the workflow integration, how do you actually how do you continue quality assurance? How do you, especially when you integrate AI, how do you know that the model is working properly within this patient population? You still need that expertise in the human in the loop in the workflow. So it's going to involve a combination of these three things. But even if you're starting from zero, I think you'll be surprised if at looking at the resources that you already have available in terms of expertise, in terms and in terms of access. Oftentimes there's equipment, there's ultrasound equipment that might even be a little bit older, but very much useful, that's being underutilized. So I think taking into account the resources that you have, kind of accounting for that to optimize your existing resources, and then at the kind of advocating for research and pilot programs that include equipment and training and longitudinal support. And then when you're ready to kind of go to larger scale, having a plan for maintaining data security across different devices, to do quality assurance, integrate into medical records while meeting local compliance standards are going to be very, very important considerations. But there's always a step one.
We have a question here. I think you mentioned in about internship. Do we have to pay for internship? How much?
No, it's not a paid internship. It's an internship that would pair you with our team of AI um, uh, and software development experts to integrate your skill set and give you real world experience in one aspect of the work that we're doing. So I'm just going to pull up that one slide here in terms of the POCUS ecosystem, because we're rolling this out in different countries and meeting local compliance and data security standards. And so I think it would be a very, very amazing experience. And one of the other missions of GUSI is to not only teach and train and make POCUS a reality, but build a community of a POCUS ecosystem that isn't just doctors, but everyone involved in the team that is required to deliver the highest quality healthcare that truly serves the people, and that includes folks like yourselves in technology and the intersections of technology and healthcare.
Thank you, Doc. Doc, last question because we are a little bit over time. We have a question here. How do you balance the speed of AI integration in Focus with the ethical guidelines you have to make sure you follow? And then there is a follow-up question. What are the AI governance frameworks you follow? This will be helpful to those who wants to implement AI in healthcare in the Philippines.
Hmm. How do I balance? I'll address the first question in terms of balancing speed with integration and adoption. And I think the speed of AI development, it is not. It's not linearly correlated with adoption, especially in healthcare. Why? Because it still takes training, awareness and training, even with existing AI and tools in order to integrate the use in healthcare. Um, and I think that element of medicine is and can actually be in many ways a good thing because it gives us more time. However, we also run the risk of taking too much time to adapt or not participating, particularly clinicians across different communities, contexts, having the voice to participate in the development of that AI. So I think local governance is important. And local being able to integrate local data, being able to reflect and reflect uh, uh, be able to integrate prospectively and really pressure test and critically evaluate and validate any tool really within any context, because the chances are that tool was not necessarily developed in that context. And so how I see kind of AI in the future is a much more kind of decentralized, a much more decentralized process where local governance, local champions, local centers, local health facilities can have much more control over their own data, and then that data is used to train models that will be used on their own population. So that's kind of my hope and vision for the future. But we still have a long way to go. And once again, I just want to really extend my gratitude to the work that's being done. at MIT Critical Data by Dr. Leo Selly and many of his colleagues around language for the ethical deployment of AI. But the train has left the station. I think it's now up to us to optimize the benefits of it and attenuate the risks. Thank you.
Thank you all for your valuable contribution. And again, thank you, Dr. Mena, for sharing your valuable time and expertise with us. Okay, thank you all for joining us today. And remember, the conversation doesn't have to end here. And for next week, we will have Dr. Reina Juna Sumatra of Bohol for IOL 201 Community Connect. And now, to receive your electronic certificate and for us to improve our next session, kindly answer the evaluation form flash on your screen on or before 12 noon today. And that brings us to the end of today's session, Bridging Diagnostic Gaps, Integrating Point of Care, Ultrasound, and AI into Human Workflow. Once again, thank you, Dr. Mena Ramos, and to all of you. This is JRP. I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye.